Part 24. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 231. Chu Hongii didn't stop her, she just raised her head and looked at the graceful young master in front of her without saying a word. Mr. Fukin had a smile on his face, and his voice was gentle and soft. "What are you looking at, madam? You have such a troublesome face. How do you control yourself from going out to attract bees and butterflies?" Fukin was slightly stunned, then he laughed dumbly. "I have a fierce wife at home, how can my husband dare to attract bees and butterflies?" "Strong wife?" Chu Hongii frowned and remained silent, without refuting. "It's really tough." Fukin sat down next to her, hugged her slender waist from the side, buried his head on her shoulder, and smelled the clean breath on her body. "The slave family has been in the dust since childhood, and has a low status. It is only because of this figure. Hezes was able to gain a foothold in the Kingian building and was lucky enough to earn a position as a pillar. However, in the final analysis, he is just an actor. Even if he is praised by guests, he still cannot get rid of his status as a servant. That is why the general still treats me as a human being." Chu Hongii's tone was subtle. "A lowly status? A servant?" Fukin said calmly, "Well, aren't all actors like this? Is this a bitter trick?" "No, it's just a drama addiction." Fukin laughed and couldn't help but kiss her cheek. "Have you missed me, madam? I didn't plan to challenge you. I just wanted to scare you on purpose." Chu Hongii said calmly, "Don't worry, I won't hit you." Fukin was silent for a moment, and couldn't help but laugh out loud, which made the corners of his eyebrows sparkle, and his features were full of charm. "My lady is so cute." "Cute?" Chu Hongii frowned. Quan took it as a compliment. After drinking a cup of tea, she asked, "When will the princess return to Dongling?" "It will probably take a few days. Fukin is not in a hurry. Anyway, he will definitely go back before Nan 11's birthday. Rong Yu has already agreed. There will be no problems with Nan 11. It's just a matter of a few days earlier or a few days later. What he is thinking about now is his affairs with Chu Hongii. My husband is not young anymore. Let's get married when we go back to Tangling this time," Fukin said warmly, with a smile on his lips. "If we get married as soon as possible, I won't have to worry about me attracting bees outside." "Attract butterflies?" "Attracting bees and butterflies?" Chu Hongii tilted her head and looked at him expressionlessly. "Do you dare? Not afraid of having your legs broken?" "I don't dare." Fukin Kongshan Rulia gave in. "My husband's body and mind belong to my wife alone, and no one else can covet her." Chu Hongii was silent for a moment. "There are still some obstacles to getting married." "Obstacle?" Fukin's expression slightly condensed. "What's the obstacle?" Chu Hongii said, "Your mother-in-law doesn't want me to marry you." The smile in Fukin's eyes was slightly cold. He didn't ask why, because he knew what the reason was. There was a hint of coldness in the corners of his warm eyes, and his voice seemed to be soaked in frost, but he just said lightly, "I'm afraid she can't be my master. As a royal princess, she must personally organize her son's marriage and carefully select the one who is worthy of her son's status." Fukin's father, Prince Jing, is the fourth prince in Dongling, and is now over 40 years old. His mother, Princess Jing, is a powerful woman. She comes from a famous family and holds great power in the prince's palace. Her status as mistress is unshakable. Fukin is Princess Jing's only legitimate son. Although there is a concubine in the palace, Fukin will definitely be the future heir to the palace. Princess Jing does not think that Chu Hongii's status is not worthy of her, but that Chu Hongii is too strong and her temperament must not be accepted. Discipline: she wants to find a daughter-in-law who is knowledgeable, respectful, and virtuous. Fukin even knew who she liked, but it had nothing to do with him. "Don't take her words to heart," Fukin said calmly. "No one in this world can interfere with who the wife I want to marry is. Chu Hong I said nothing, but she had the same thought in her heart. The obstacles from others were nothing to her. The reason why she spoke out was just to let him know that there was such a thing. Neither Fukin nor Chu Hong I cared about the approval of others. Apart from each other, no one in the world could be their master. Now that we have finished talking about the irrelevant things, is it time for my wife to take a physical exam? The dust surrounded her body, and the clear and clean breath sprayed on the side of her white and tender neck. She raised her lips and smiled with a charming eyebrow. Prepare for your husband well, I welcome my wife to ravage you at any time. Chu Hong I tilted her head slightly and looked at him silently. Fukin kissed her earlobe. How about we cook the rice before anyone can object? Chu Hong I's eyebrows sank slightly, as if she was thinking about the feasibility, but she only considered it for a moment, and then she nodded, okay. Fukin's expression paused slightly. Chu Hong I directly expressed her actions, reaching out to fish him out, pulling him from his side to the front, and hugged him sideways. Fukin's expression suddenly became subtle, red clothes. Chu Hong I looked down at him, holding a tall man in her arms effortlessly. You obey me, and I will protect you from now on. Fukin almost laughed. Chu Hong I didn't hesitate anymore, she hugged him and walked to the inner room. Fukin didn't struggle at all. It was a rare opportunity to enjoy the treatment of a little sweetheart. His body was directly placed on the bed, and when Chu Hong I followed him, then he sighed, little ancestor, I'm just kidding. Chu Hong I frowned, I'm not kidding. No, there was a smile on Fukin's lips, but he shook his head in refusal. You are a girl, and you can't mess around before you get married. He was a man, so his reputation didn't matter, but no matter how strong she was still a girl. When she returns to Dongling, if her virginity is known to others, she will be criticized. Even if he protects her, those strange looks are still an invisible harm. Chu Hong I looked at him silently. Be good. Fu Chen kissed the corner of her lips, his voice gentle and doting. Wait until the wedding night, I will let you ravage me as much as you want. Chu Hong I still didn't speak. If Chu Xuanyi knew that I did such a beastly thing to you, he would never forgive me. Fu Chen had a pitiful expression on his face. My lady doesn't want me to be beaten, right? Chu Hong I frowned slightly. Now I am going to do such a beastly thing to you. Fu Chen. Besides, he can't beat you. Chu Hong I said, if he dares to hit you, it would be a crime of insubordination. Fu Chen was silent for a moment. He is your elder brother, my future brother-in-law. There is no such thing as insubordination. I mean, insubordination is insubordination. Chu Hong I said, with me here, he dare not beat you. Fu Chen. Chu Xuanyi, who was lying in the pavilion in the garden board at this time, was squinting comfortably. Suddenly, a breeze blew by, accompanied by the faint fragrance in the garden blowing across his nose, and he sneezed suddenly. Achoo. What's going on? Is the weather getting cooler, or is he allergic to pollen? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 232. Nan 11's mother soon learned that she was pregnant. After a brief moment of dazement, the princess of Dongling slowly frowned and said, pregnant. Nan 11 nodded. Xianyuan 11 turned to look at Rong Yu, and seeing that he was silent, she said calmly, whose surname will this child take in the future? Whose surname will it take? Nan 11 was slightly stunned, and then said, this is Rong Yu's child, of course it will take Rong Yu's surname. Whose surname will it take? Rong Yu said calmly, Xianyuan. Nan 11 was stunned, and then she understood what her mother meant, and she couldn't help but frown. She was Rong Yu's wife, and the child should have taken Rong Yu's surname, but she was a princess of the Dongling royal family, and she was also a princess who was appointed as the crown prince. As the future king of a country, the child seemed to have to take the royal surname. But this was too unfair to Rong Yu. Nan 11 sat on the brocade couch and pondered for a moment. This is a child conceived in the regent palace of the Great Zhou dynasty. It belongs to the Great Zhou dynasty and takes the surname of Rongyu. Xianyuan 11 did not speak, holding the teacup and sipping it gently, without expressing any objection or agreement. The first child must take the surname of Rongyu. Nan 11 was firm, whether to inherit the Great Zhou dynasty or become a free and secluded master of the Juxiao pavilion in the future, it is up to him to decide. Rongyu and I will not force him, but he has no choice in the surname. Xianyuan 11 was silent for a moment. Master of the Juxiao pavilion. Nan 11 nodded, and raised the corners of her lips. Yes, Rongyu is not only the regent of the Great Zhou dynasty, but also the mysterious master of the Juxiao pavilion. Our child has enjoyed all the honor and glory in the world since he was born. I think he is really the lucky one of God. If you don't want to be an emperor, you can take charge of the Juxiao pavilion. You can enjoy freedom and have a respected status at the same time. It can also better protect the Great Zhou dynasty and Dongling, and curb the ambitions of other countries. It's just too perfect. The more Nan 11 thought about it, the more she felt, I really married a godlike husband. Xianyuan 11's mouth twitched. Look at your crazy look. A trace of smile flashed across Rongyu's eyes, and the corners of his lips couldn't help curling up. Since marrying Nan 11, he has become less and less stingy with a smile on his face. Although it only happens in front of Nan 11, compared with his previous cold and taciturn appearance, his expression is really much richer. What if it's a girl? Xianyuan 11 asked. The throne of the Great Zhou will definitely not be inherited by a woman, and Juxiao Pavilion probably won't be able to do it either. The power of the rivers and lakes is different from the king of a country. It's not enough to have someone loyal, but it requires strong strength to make people submit. Girls should be pampered. It's not easy to control Juxiao Pavilion, which is full of masters, in the future. Unlike Dongling, the Great Zhou has never had a precedent of a woman ascending the throne, so if it's a girl, even if she takes Rongyu's surname, it's impossible for her to inherit the throne of the Great Zhou. As for the mysterious Juxiao Pavilion, there are many masters and hidden dragons. How can a delicate girl have the courage to tame these dragons and tigers? Nan 11 was silent for a moment and looked at Rongyu. What do you think? Wait until the child is born, Rongyu said. Look at the qualifications and talents, do what is suitable. Nan 11 hummed, anyway, my child must be raised well. Brothers will love each other in the future and must not kill each other for power. Hearing this, Xianyuan 11 smiled faintly. The idea is good, but it's a pity that it sounds like a simple and kind girl. Being in power, no matter how well you raise your child and how hard you teach him, some children have the pursuit of power in their bones, and this cannot be completely avoided. Nan 11 frowned. It's okay, Rongyu said quickly. Our child will not be in this situation. Xianyuan 11's expression is subtle. Is this how he pampers his wife? She suddenly felt that she was an eyesore sitting here. Although Rongyu looked very reserved and restrained, and Nan 11 sat aside as if nothing had happened, she felt that she had delayed the affection between the young couple. Xianyuan 11 was also young. Although she was a little blind when she was young, it did not hinder the fact that she was an experienced person. There was no rush for the child, so it was better to let Rongyu and Nan 11 discuss it first, so she stood up. You can do it yourself. Anyway, someone must inherit the kingdom of the Dongling royal family. But whether it is Dezhou or Dongling, you can think clearly in advance and look ahead. Don't be obsessed with love all day long, thinking that love can satisfy you. Nan 11 blushed. Leave everything to Rongyu, I don't bother to worry about those. Xianyuan 11 glanced at her sideways, explained a few things to pay attention to when pregnant, and then turned and walked out. Rongyu sent her to the outside of the hall, watched her leave accompanied by Yinyu, and turned back to the inner hall. Nan 11 held her chin and looked at him, her eyes full of tenderness. Rong Yu walked to her and sat down, and naturally held her in his arms. It doesn't matter whose surname the child takes, I don't care about this. Nan 11 sighed sadly, I think it's better to let my mother be the empress. Rong Yu raised his eyebrows. Did I change my mind too quickly? Nan 11 looked at him. It is said that women are fickle, and this sentence is indeed true. Rong Yu said, no, you are very good. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, helplessly reached out and touched his noble face, with a subtle tone. Rong Yu, if I said it was the cold winter of December, would you immediately ask someone to prepare warm clothes for me? Is she right? Rong Yu nodded. You are the empress, and your husband is your most loyal subject. Nan 11. Rong Yu kissed her cheek, his voice soft, but if you really want your mother-in-law to be the empress, I will have people search the world and send all the beautiful boys to her. Nan 11's mouth twitched slightly. You want my mother to be a romantic empress? My mother-in-law is of noble character and will not do such a thing. Rong Yu said calmly, just put the beautiful boy in the harem to appreciate, it can make you happy, just like the feeling of walking in the imperial garden when you have nothing to do. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Rong Yu, can I think you are flattering my mother? The cold and arrogant regent has never had the habit of praising people. There are very few people in the world who can be praised by him. At this time, he actually praised her mother for her noble character. Although her mother is indeed much higher in character than those noble ladies who only know how to gossip, the point is not what her mother is like, but Rong Yu's words at this time are indeed suspected of flattery. Rong Yu looked at her without saying a word. Nan 11 kissed the corner of his lips, her voice soft and a bit sighing. Rong Yu, what should I do if I like you more and more? Then I will like you for the rest of my life. Rong Yu whispered, you must always like me and never change your mind. Nan 11 hummed, don't change your mind. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 233. After lunch, Nan 11 and Rong Yu rested in the inner hall. The servant informed Mr. Yun that he wanted to see him. Rong Yu was massaging Nan 11's calves. Hearing this, he only said, let him go to the study and wait. As soon as he finished speaking, Yeching Cheng walked in. When did the Prince Regent become a wife-slave? Rong Yu frowned slightly and said in an indifferent tone, get out. Yeching Cheng raised his eyebrows. Go out? She glanced at Nan 11, who was half lying on the bed, and suddenly understood, okay, this is to wait for her beloved wife to take a nap. Rong Yu. Nan 11 sat up from the bed and stopped Rong Yu's movements. Mr. Yun probably has something serious to say. You go and take a look first. I'll chat with Princess Jing Cheng for a while. Rong Yu was silent for a moment and then said, don't be too tired. If you feel sleepy, just take a nap. I'll be back soon. Nan 11 nodded. Rong Yu then turned around and walked out. Nan 11 stood up and walked out of the inner hall, calling Yeching Cheng, Princess, don't take it to heart, Rong Yu dash. I know that my beloved wife is a treasure, and everyone else is just straw. Yeching Cheng joked, walked to the low couch next to the screen and sat down. The regent really loves the princess to the core. Nan 11 asked Haitang to serve tea and smiled softly, isn't it the same between you and Mr. Yun? Yeching Cheng said calmly, Yunting's temper, if I don't force him, I will never wait for him to come back to me on his own initiative in this life. Nan 11 said, Master Yun has a gentle temperament, which is different from Rong Yu. It's really not the same. Yeching Cheng took a sip of tea quietly and said lightly, we are going back. Nan 11 looked at her in surprise, go back. Yes. Yeching Cheng nodded. Yunting went to see the regent just to talk about this matter. I came here today to say goodbye to you. We plan to return to Shu first. Nan 11 said nothing because she didn't know what to say. Shu is currently experiencing civil strife. Yan was taken away by Juxiao Pavilion. His life and death are unknown. The emperor's health is deteriorating. The other princes of Shu will not let go of this excellent opportunity. They only wish that Yan died outside. Ye Cheng held the teacup and said calmly, "This is also an opportunity for Yunting and me." Nan 11 pondered, "A chance for revenge?" Ye Cheng nodded, "Yes, a chance for revenge. Have you thought about it?" "I have thought about it a long time ago." Ye Cheng smiled lightly, with a calm expression. "I am a cold-blooded person. Although I was born in the royal family, I did not feel any blood and affection from the royal family. Instead, Yunting brought it to me. The most warmth, he wants revenge. My position is very firm." After a pause, "Although I have a domineering temper and a bad temper, I am essentially just a narrow-minded little woman. I only see the love of my children and my own happiness in my eyes. I don't want to care about the interests of my family and country. I don't care who becomes the emperor, I just want him to be happy." Nan 11 understood what she meant. In order to get Yunting to take revenge, she did not hesitate to make the entire Shu royal family an enemy. "Actually, I don't have a choice." Ye Cheng casually lowered his eyes and chuckled. The Yun family was once the #1 family of generals in the Shu kingdom. They held the power of 300,000 soldiers and horses. They protected the borders of the Shu kingdom with impregnable strength for 10 years. However, their achievements were so great. The earthquake master and the disagreement with the king finally aroused the king's murderous intention. Nan 11 was surprised. Putting down the teacup, Ye Cheng raised his eyes and looked at Nan 11. "I told you before that because my mother died when I was young, I stayed alone in the palace with no one to rely on. I also hated the intrigue and deceitful environment, so I was withdrawn and gloomy. I am willing to be close to anyone, and then I met Yunting. This jade-like and flawless young man made me see the sunshine. I loved staying with him, seeing his smile, and seeing the blue sea and blue sky in his eyes. Pure luster." As he spoke, the corners of Ye Cheng's lips raised slightly, and there was a hint of a smile on his face. "I am domineering by nature, so when I see such a young man who makes me happy, how can I let him go? I simply let him be my sidekick guard." Nan 11 was a little surprised. The royal family is strict, don't they need to avoid the suspicion between men and women? "Dislike between men and women," Ye Cheng said calmly, "my palace is isolated from the world. Although I am not favored, but with the blessing of the Feng clan bloodline, no one in the palace really dares to mess with me. The queen and concubines are all here. Knowing that I am withdrawn and difficult to get close to, they all treat me as if I don't exist. Anyway, I am just a weak princess, not involved in the crown prince dispute, and have no strong background to rely on. Even if I do some deviant things, they don't bother to pay attention." Nan 11 nodded thoughtfully, but she also understood in her heart that the so-called harem dispute was about the king's favor when she was young, and the position of the queen and the fourth concubine. The position of emperor. A truly smart person will not waste too much meaningless time arguing with a princess who has lost her mother and concubine. But an accident 4 years ago ruined the beautiful relationship between me and Yunting overnight. Ye Cheng's smile faded slightly, his expression cold and calm, and his voice gradually became colder. The Yun family's father and brother were at the border. They were framed to death and were accused of collaborating with the enemy. None of the loyal generals survived. When the news came back to the imperial capital that night, Mrs. Yun and the sister-in-law of the Yun family fainted on the spot as if they were struck by lightning. Nan 11 frowned, charge of collaborating with the enemy. Ye Cheng hummed, Yunting was so anxious that he almost went crazy. In the cold winter months, I poured a bucket of cold water over his head to calm him down. Afterwards, he felt that something was fishy. After settling his mother and sister-in-law, I asked him to go to the border to find out the truth, and the emperor agreed. I felt uneasy and gave him the few reliable guards around me to protect his safety. Nan 11 pursed her lips slightly and was speechless for a moment. All words pale in comparison to the pain of losing a loved one. But we were all too young at that time and didn't know how dangerous and vicious the human heart is. Yunting spent more than half a year finding out the truth, but was assassinated on the way back and almost lost his life. He was later saved by the regent Ye Qingqing's tone paused slightly, and crystal water vapor seemed to appear in the corners of his eyes. Later, a huge fire burned down the Yun family's mansion. Mrs. Yun, Yunting's sister-in-law, and all the servants were killed in the fire. Nan 11's expression condensed slightly. After hearing this, she already understood that this conspiracy to kill should be the emperor's plan. Sure enough, the king is ruthless and treats his loyal ministers without any charges. All he needs to do is his achievements shock the master can be used as a reason to kill someone. After Yunting disappeared, I secretly searched for him for 3 years. Ye Qingcheng raised his head and looked at the fluttering branches and leaves outside the window, with a cool color in his eyes. The emperor of Shu also sent many people to look for him, but he still couldn't. The person who found Yunting. Nan 11 frowned and thought for a moment. Wrong, you said that when Mr. Yun was rescued, he had many new injuries on his body. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 234. Ye Qingqing's eyes raised a cold arc, and his calm tone could not hide the coldness. I will continue to find out what happened back then. This time I returned to Shu Kingdom to settle the previous matters. None of the people involved can escape. They need to die for the innocent people of the Yun family who died, they need to be buried with them for the soldiers who died innocently and tragically while defending their home and country, and they need to pay for the worries she has endured every day and night in the past 3 years. Torture pays. A familiar pain arose in Nan 11's heart. The most common reason for the royal family's calculations and frame UPS was high achievements to shock the master, and the most commonly used charges were collaboration with the enemy and treason, disobedience. If it weren't for Rong Yushao in his previous life, holding power made Rong Chuiyun jealous, so how could he be plotted step by those with sinister intentions? The words power and interests are stained with the blood of too many people, and they also bury too many people's grievances and sorrows. She could undo the tragedy of her previous life once she was reborn, but Yunting could never see those close relatives again. Who else could feel the heartbreak except himself? In fact, I have been afraid these years. I am afraid that I will never hear from him again, that he is no longer alive, and that he will turn his hatred of the royal family on me, although I am not innocent. Ye Qingcheng laughed at himself. Laughing, with the blood of the royal family of Shu flowing in your body, who can say that you are innocent? Nan 11 came back to her senses and said warmly, fortunately, Mr. Yun finally understands your thoughts. It's not easy for him either. Ye Qingcheng held the teacup, his eyes a little blurry. People often realize their incompetence only when they are helpless. I always thought that I could get a pure land and live a quiet life by staying away from those power disputes. Days passed, but the misfortune of the Yun family made me realize how naive my thoughts were. They did not die because of me. However, if I was strong enough, even if I could not protect the Yun family's father and brother who were far away at the border, I could at least protect my mother. Protect them with your sister-in-law instead of letting them die in the flames. As long as there is a relative still there, for Yunting, at least there is still something to think about. But when the huge fire in the Yun family burned the entire house to ashes, Yunting didn't even have a chance to come back and see his mother. Ye Qingcheng has never experienced the feeling of family affection since she was a child, and the pain of losing a loved one is far less profound. But she can't imagine how Yunting went through that period of time, and she also doesn't know how she survived that hardship. 3 years. Nan 11 thought of the day Ye Qingcheng and Yunting met for the first time, and frowned. Have you ever mentioned that you picked up a child before? Ye Cheng shook his head and chuckled, "Where did you pick it up?" "That's Yunting's nephew. His brother's son." Yes, Ye Cheng nodded. His brother was barely standing when he was killed, and he only had a son. This child is also a fortune teller. When the Yun family was on fire, he was taken with me by my side and he luckily escaped. As he spoke, he sighed slightly. After all, he left a bloodline for his brother. I don't know if I should thank this child. The crack between Yunting and I has to be repaired by the child. Nan 11 guessed that Ye Cheng might have wanted to look at this child to soothe his anxious thoughts about Yunting's life and death in those days, but unexpectedly, he saved his life. Yunting thought that the fire killed everyone in the Yun family. In fact, it was not just him. Even the man sitting on the dragon chair also thought that no one in the Yun family survived, except for Yunting, who is still missing. A mocking smile appeared on Ye Qingcheng's lips. Prince Ye Yan and his queen mother were one of the culprits. In order to stabilize their position, they contributed a lot and killed the general of the Yun family and replaced them with their own relatives to take charge of the troops. Daquan, there was civil strife in the Great Zhou dynasty 2 years ago. The prince's uncle thought this was an opportunity and proposed to attack the Great Zhou dynasty and expand the territory. However, he did not expect to be defeated at the hands of your husband in the battle with the Great Zhou dynasty. It is really retribution. Nan 11 nodded understandingly. No wonder Ye Yan was kidnapped on his way back to Shu from the Great Zhou dynasty. Yunting's revenge started directly with Ye Yan. At this time, they chose to go back to Shu, and they obviously had a careful plan. Thank you and the regent for the hospitality these days. Ye Cheng smiled faintly. I will come here again when I have the opportunity. Well, when we find time, maybe we will not come to Dazhu, but to visit the queen in Dongling. Your Majesty. Nan 11 laughed. Who can say for sure what will happen in the future? In order to thank the regent for his kindness to Yunting in the past 3 years, I will tell you something. Ye Cheng frowned slightly. Have you ever doubted why the regent was so good to you? So good that it puzzles you? Nan 11 was slightly startled, then nodded. It's indeed a bit strange, but I don't doubt his intentions. What's the point? Ye Cheng smiled. It's just because we love too deeply and are too persistent, so we always worry about gains and losses. If someone says something specious in front of you in the future, don't believe it. That's right. Wrong Yakong, I haven't done anything bad to you. Nan 11 frowned slightly. You mean someone will sow discord? Whether it is true or not, you have to believe in your own feelings. Ye Cheng stood up and said, the secret must not be leaked. In the past few years, I have used a lot of strange magic that I shouldn't have for Yunting. I am really afraid that one day I will be punished by the law of heaven. Seeing that she was about to leave, Nan 11 stood up and saw her off. Don't worry, the relationship between Rongyu and I is as solid as a rock, and we will not listen to others' instigation. Some things can be known if you want to know them, and it doesn't matter if you don't know them. She won't force it. If the truth will affect their feelings, she would rather know nothing. Ye Cheng hummed and walked out with Nan 11. Some things should be known to you when the time comes. He will let you know. If he doesn't say it now, maybe he just hasn't figured out how to say it. Nan 11 only said 3 words, I believe him. Walking out of the palace, he raised his eyes and saw Yinyu rushing from a distance. He soon came to him with a strange expression, Princess. Nan 11 was puzzled. What's wrong? There is something, ahem, I have something to tell the princess. Yinyu cleared his throat. I just went out and heard something very interesting. Very interesting? Nan 11 and Ye Cheng looked at each other, deeply suspecting that Yinyu was deliberately playing a riddle at this time. What's going on? The Prime Minister's mansion. Oh no, Lord Nan is no longer the Prime Minister. His concubine Nan Xiao, your concubine's sister, Princess, last night. Yinyu paused, flew up the stone steps in front of the palace, walked in front of Nan 11 and whispered, last night, she gave herself to the northern frontier crown prince Duan Muyu. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 235. Nan 11 was silent, not knowing what to say for a moment. Nan Jiao hooked up with Duan Muyu. Was this Li's idea or her father's? With a frown on her face, Nan 11 said calmly, "Don't worry about her. She has nothing to do with me now. They are free to do whatever they want." Yunyu nodded. Also, Master Nan got into a fight with someone in the academy and was persuaded to drop out of school. A good card has been beaten to pieces, and I'm probably talking about you. My father Yeching Cheng smiled lightly. Master Nan and his concubines and children have finally tasted the consequences of their own actions. It is indeed your own fault. The love between a poor student and a merchant's daughter is not a shameful thing. On the contrary, if he didn't care so much about the world's eyes and treated his first wife wholeheartedly, he would now have a prosperous career, a happy wife and daughter, a harmonious and happy family, and a powerful regent. Son-in-law, no one dares to look down upon him even in the imperial city where the powerful are everywhere. In the final analysis, it is just his own vanity and ruthless nature revealed. However, many times, the more heartless people are, the better off they are than others. Nan 11 smiled lightly. Fate is always unfair to good people. That's why there is a saying that good people don't live long, but disasters last for thousands of years. Isn't that what happened in the previous life? Rong Yu did not fight for power, but was eventually plotted to death. Instead, Rong Chuiyun secured the throne, Nan Xingzi secured his position, and even Gu Qingsha rose to prominence. This ending is just because she was lucky enough to be reborn with the blessing of God, so that she could have everything over again. Otherwise, who would avenge Rong Yu? A chill flashed through Nan 11's eyes. Every time she thought of the dream in her previous life, the little affection she had for Nan Xingzi instantly disappeared, leaving only hatred. Rong Yu and Yunting didn't talk for long in the study. When he saw the two approaching from a distance, Yeching Cheng turned around and greeted them, saying calmly, "Since we have decided to leave, we won't stay any longer. Regent, please take care of yourself, King and Princess, and see you again someday." Before Rong Yu and Nan 11 spoke, Yunting added in a warm voice, "There is no need to meet again by chance. I am from Juxiao Pavilion, and there is always a chance to meet." Hearing this, Yeching Cheng turned her head and glanced at him. "Really?" Yunting raised his eyes to the sky and nodded silently. Yeching Cheng. "Mr. Yun is right, we can meet at any time in the future." Nan 11 chuckled, "When my husband gives an order, your husband must be at your call. Isn't this the same as meeting at any time?" Yeching Cheng's mouth twitched. Rong Yu stood with his hands behind his back. There was no special emotion in his eyebrows, and his voice was still as indifferent as ever. "When you return to Shu Kingdom, you can use the power of Juxiao Pavilion to your heart's content. You have been tricked once, don't let it happen again." Yunting narrowed his eyes. "Yes." Yeching Cheng smiled coldly. "The first time he was tricked, the whole army was almost wiped out. If there is a second time, Yunting and I will probably go to the underworld and not have the shame to see his parents." Yunting said nothing. In the past 3 years, he has learned to hide and restrain his emotions. He has a sworn feud and will not stop until he kills all the emperor and empress. More than 1,000 days of forbearance have taught him to heal his wounds. He hid his hatred, but the hatred burning in his chest every day and night tortured him all the time, always reminding the Emperor of Shu that there was still a great revenge that had not been avenged. Yeching Cheng was right. After 3 years of forbearance and 3 years of tempering, if he was still being plotted against, he would not be able to see the ancestors of the Yun family even if he went to the underworld. Neither Yunting nor Yeching Cheng were talkative people. They had already said what needed to be said and left quickly. Rong Yu and Nan 11 stood outside the Zhao Chen palace, watching the two people leave. When Yunting and Yakingchen's figures drifted away on the corridor and disappeared from sight, the two of them looked away. Rong Yunan 11 smiled lightly. Everyone has their own way of loving, and every couple who loves each other has their own different fate. Not everyone in this world is as lucky as me. So lucky, to be chosen by him in the vast sea of people, and to be cared for and loved by him like a treasure. He protected her from the wind and rain, and built her a warm house with only sunshine but no frost and snow, so that she could live better than a god. Comfortable. Rong Yu held her hand, turned around and walked towards Zhao Chen Hall. I am the lucky one. There it is again. Nan 11 looked at the steps under her feet in silence. When she said she was lucky, he also said the same thing, I am the lucky person. Today it was like this again, like a promise, like gratitude, like luck, but without a single word of explanation. It was as if it was his great blessing that she was willing to like him. Nan 11 was deep in thought, but did not ask any more questions. She knew that Rong Yu had a secret in his heart, but if he didn't tell it, it proved that he wasn't ready to speak yet. If he decides to tell her, he will take the initiative even if she doesn't speak. So no need to ask. Even if they are already the closest couple, they should still treat each other with the most basic respect, not force his will, and not make things difficult for him. Nan 11 raised the corners of her lips slightly. Rong Yu. Huh? Rong Yu tilted his head. Are you tired? I'm not tired, Nan 11 laughed. I didn't do anything, how could I be tired? I want to tell you that there is a little connection between Nanjiao and the northern prince Duanwu. Nanjiao and the prince of northern Xinjiang? Rong Yu was silent for a moment, pondering the meaning of the sentence in his heart, and then said calmly, De Zhou has no intention of marrying with Beijiang, nor will it allow any woman from a minister's family to marry a man from the royal family of other countries. Nan 11 smiled faintly. The prince of Beijiang should not look down on a concubine's daughter from a minister's family who has lost power. It is definitely impossible to marry her in a formal way. It may be okay to make a deal with each other, and each party will get what it needs. Nanjiao is 15 years old this year, and she is about to get married. However, given the current situation of the Nan family, it is impossible for the decent and powerful families in the imperial capital to consider marrying with the Nan family. In addition to the fact that the Nan family has lost power, they are more afraid of offending the regent. So Nanjiao had no choice, and finding Duanmu was probably a desperate decision. 15 years old is already the age to consider marriage, and further delay will only waste the best years. The prince of northern frontier came with the purpose of marriage, but failed to achieve the purpose of marriage. Although he was a little cautious about De Zhou after being defeated, he did not need to be overly afraid of Rong Yu, so as long as he was interested in Nanjiao, he would naturally dare to accept her. Besides, Nanjiao was good looking, and the 15-year-old girl was as beautiful as a flower. Unless Duanmu was a gentleman, there was no reason to refuse. Author's words. The plot of these two chapters was a bit bland, but it was normal for the plot to go this far. There will be more exciting things in the future, so please look forward to it. The male and female protagonists are not abused. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 236. Nan 11 ignored her, and spent the next few days in the palace to raise her baby. However, with Yunyu as a know-it-all, she would know almost immediately if there was any trouble outside. The Dongling envoy temporarily stayed, and Fukan and Chu Hongii ignored what was going on outside the window and only focused on cultivating their relationship. The envoys of Ziki, Lin Wu, and Lin Beizhu suffered setbacks at the hands of Chu Hongii. They lost face and were too embarrassed to stay any longer. Within a few days, they took the initiative to say goodbye, and then led the envoys and guards on their way back to Ziki. Halfway through the car, a spy from Ziki came from the border and reported in an anxious tone, "I just received the news a few days ago that the regent has been in poor health during this period. Even the imperial doctors in the palace are helpless. Things are going to change in the palace." Lin Wu and Lin Beizu were both shocked. How could that happen? Lin Beizu's face suddenly changed. "Didn't the Prince Regent have good health before we came to Dazhu? I had never heard of him having any symptoms of discomfort. Why did he suddenly?" "I'm not sure, but I'm not sure yet whether it's a symptom of poisoning," the spy said. "General, it's better to go back quickly. It's too late, I'm afraid." What he was afraid of, he didn't finish directly, but the meaning was already very obvious. Lin Wu's expression changed, and he suddenly remembered what Dongling General Chu Hongii said on the day he arrived at the imperial palace of the Zhou dynasty, and couldn't help but ask, "Has anyone with suspicious behavior appeared in the imperial city recently?" What he was worried about was that Juxiao Pavilion had penetrated into the imperial city, and the consequences would be disastrous. The spy looked hesitant. "I don't know. He was only in charge of the intelligence business at the border." When he suddenly received news from the imperial city, he rushed to inform Lin Wu. He was afraid that something might change if it was too late. How could he have so much time to ask clearly about the situation? Moreover, the imperial city is so far away from the border, and it is far from convenient for spies to pass information between them. Lin Wu's heart sank, and he immediately ordered, "Speed up and hurry up, we must rush back to the imperial city within 10 days. Yes. Over there, Lin Wugang received urgent news from the imperial city of Ziki. Over here, Su Chang, the Prime Minister of South Vietnam, also received news that shocked him the next day. "Prime Minister, something happened at the border." Soldiers from the South Vietnam border camp came over with anxious faces and reported urgently, 5 days ago, a fire broke out in the military camp's grain depot, and 70% of the grain and grass were burned. General Gao, Commander Do, etc. All the generals were poisoned by a strange poison, suffering from vomiting and diarrhea. After seeing it, the military doctor used several herbal medicines for diagnosis and treatment, but there was no improvement. Now they need to find doctors with superb medical skills immediately and transport food and grass to the border, otherwise the soldiers will soon face the dilemma of having no food to eat. At that time, Su Chang was having a secret conversation with Duan Muyu, the prince of northern Xinjiang, in a private room in a restaurant in the imperial capital. When they heard the soldiers' report, both of them changed their expressions. Su Chang and Duan Muyu looked at each other, their eyebrows darkening. "Does Prince Duan Mu think this is Juxiao Pavilion's handiwork?" "I'm not sure." Duan Muyu's voice was cold, "but it's too much of a coincidence." Su Chang's expression was gloomy and unclear. "If Juxiao Pavilion really has some unknown relationship with Dazhu, plus Dongling is an in-law ally, we have to be careful." Duan Muyu took a sip of wine and said in a calm tone, "I asked Nanjiao last night. Nanjiao knew nothing about the identity of her sister-in-law. During the more than 10 years since Princess Dongling was married to Nanjingzi, he has indeed never revealed his identity." Su Shang said nothing. He knew that Nanjiao took the initiative to show friendship to Duan Muyu. Everyone knew the purpose of a woman's willingness to show friendship to Duan Muyu. Duan Muyu just refused to accept anyone who came and wanted her. As for being able to get her from Nanjiao, you don't have to have any illusions about what information you can find out there. As the Prince of Northern Xinjiang, Duan Muyu has a high status, and there is never a shortage of bed-warming women around him. If a beautiful woman takes the initiative to throw herself into his arms, for him, apart from enjoying the pleasure of a beautiful woman for a few days, it will not bring any extra trouble. What reason for rejection? Nanjiao used her body to please him, and he gave Nanjiao the gold, silver, and jewelry she wanted. After everyone got what they needed, they parted ways. If he could find out some information he wanted to know, it would be an added value. However, the current emergency situation was completely beyond their expectation. Suchang said, "The situation at the border cannot be ignored. I have to leave Dazhu tonight. What do you think, Prince? If Juxiao Pavilion really wants to take action, it cannot only target South Vietnam. 11 Chi Linwu has already left first. It is not known whether he received any urgent information on the way. However, important matters of the family and the country cannot be taken lightly. It is better to go back as soon as possible." Duan Mu said coldly, "I will say goodbye to the regent of Great Zhou early tomorrow morning. This trip can only be regarded as in vain." They all underestimated the strength and temper of the regent of the Great Zhou dynasty, thinking that they could take advantage of the civil strife in the Great Zhou dynasty. Unexpectedly, not only did Ndongling appear on the way, but even the Juxiao Pavilion was involved, so they had no choice but to take advantage of it. Return home for now. The prince of a country is always a little uneasy when he stays on someone else's territory, so it is best to take the best approach. Moreover, the fact that the Prince of Shu was kidnapped has not yet been found out, so it is always right to be cautious. So in the evening of that day, Suchang took the initiative to see the regent. He thanked the regent for his hospitality these days and said goodbye. After receiving the regent's permission, Suchang left the capital of the Zhou dynasty with the South Vietnamese envoys without stopping for a moment. The lights were bright at night, and Duan Mu, who had eaten well, was leaning on the bedside, with his clothes half undressed, revealing his strong bronze chest. Nan Jiao snuggled meekly into the crook of his shoulder and said sweetly, "Prince, you can take me to Moyo Pavilion tomorrow. Want to go shopping? I want to buy 2 pieces of jewelry." "I'm afraid I won't be able to do it tomorrow," Duan Mu said calmly. "The prince will leave Dazhu early tomorrow morning, and I won't have time to accompany you to visit any pavilion." "Leaving early tomorrow morning?" Nan Jiao looked at him in surprise, suppressed her uneasiness, and forced a smile. Why are you leaving so suddenly?" Duan Mu glanced at her. "I am a guest of Dezhou, and I am not the owner of this place. There is no need to stay." Then Nan Jiao felt a little flustered and couldn't help but sit up from the bed. Then, I. You are the daughter of an official of the Zhou dynasty. You cannot leave the Zhou dynasty without permission from the royal family." Duan Mu's voice was calm and cold. "Even if I want to take you with me, I can't." Nan Jiao's face turned pale, and her eyes couldn't help but turn red. She looked at him in disbelief. "But I have given my body to the prince." "This is of your own free will, isn't it?" Duan Mu said in a calm tone. After saying that, he got out of bed, walked outside and brought in a jade plate. "You have served me with all your heart these past 2 days, and I cannot treat you badly. These gold and silver jewelry are your reward." The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 237. On the jade plate were neatly placed 10 golden ingots, a few universal silver notes with a denomination of 100 taels each, and several exquisite jewelry boxes. Nan Jiao stared blankly at the items displayed on the jade plate. Her face turned from white to red. A feeling of humiliation swept over her, making her so embarrassed that she was almost ashamed. However, she could not say a word at this time. The Prince of Northern Xinjiang has a distinguished status. Even if he is a guest of Dazhu, he is still a valuable guest and cannot be offended by her. She should have expected such a result as early as the night she took the initiative to show her kindness. But Duan Mu's behavior tonight still made her feel a kind of naked humiliation. He was like a patron in a brothel. After he was satisfied, he gave away some money, but she didn't even have the courage to bargain, and she didn't even have any other choice. After her dignity was completely trampled on, she could only accept the rewards in silence. That's what she lacked now. "I know your current situation. These are what you need. Keep them," Duan Mu said calmly, but you have never thought about who caused this situation? This prince has always had a problem. Good habits, easy to hold grudges. If someone offends me, he will have to pay the price even if he risks his life. After all, Miss Nan is a delicate girl. Now she can hardly live anymore, but she doesn't know how to find the culprit. Want justice? Nan Jiao bit her lip. When she heard the words "I can't live any longer," she felt that her cheeks were hot, as if someone had poured hot oil on her. She bit her lip tightly and clenched her hands unconsciously. Mattress. While there are few people at night, I will send someone to take you back. Duan Mu dropped these words, turned around and walked out. Get dressed. Prince, Nan Jiao looked up at his strong back, climbed out of bed and knelt down. Please take me away. I can't marry anyone else if I stay in Dazhu. In the future, how can I see anyone? Prince, please. Prince. Duan Mu walked out indifferently, ignoring her pleas. Nan Jiao collapsed on the ground in despair, her face as pale as paper. Duan Mu left Dazhu early the next morning, and Nan Jiao was sent back to Nan's house in the middle of the night. All the annoying people are gone, and I feel that my ears suddenly feel a lot quieter. Xianyuan 11 sat in the pavilion and smiled casually. It's difficult for them to rush on a hot day, and they are in a hurry at this time. You deserve it. Nan 11 smiled lightly. Who made them want to bully Rong Yu? Do you think that with the emperor's power being emptied out, you can take the opportunity to disrupt the Zhou dynasty? They are not young, but their thought of being deep and scheming turns out to be as childish and superficial as a 3-year-old baby in front of Rong Yu, which is very ridiculous. Xianyuan 11 looked at her. Are you married and everything is ready now? Nan 11 was quiet for a moment and nodded slowly. For most women nowadays, having a perfect husband means having everything. Xianyuan 11 was non-committal. When do you plan to go to Dongling? If you ask me about my own wishes, I don't want to go at all. Nan 11 sipped her tea. How about staying in Dazhu? Be a regent princess that everyone admires, enjoy endless glory and wealth, and wear endless clothes. The silks and satins, the noble ladies and young ladies who usually have high esteem, have to grovel in front of me. They can no longer be as majestic as before. When our child is born, let Rong Yu make him the emperor. We can live a happy life as a couple of gods and gods, and be as happy as we want. Isn't it more majestic to be Her Majesty the Queen, who is above all others? That's different. Nan 11 shook his head. I don't have any sense of belonging to Dongling. It's like Dazhu is my home, but after I went to Dongling, I became a guest. And even if this guest has the supreme status, that kind of it still feels different from staying at home. You are worried that Rong Yu will be wronged. Xianyuan 11 exposed her truest thoughts with one sentence. There is a girl in my family who grew up, and when she grew up, she became someone else's family. This really doesn't matter. Wrong. A married daughter throws away water and puts her husband first in everything. Nan 11 narrowed her eyes. If you care too much about someone, you will worry about gains and losses. Now I have truly understood the weight of myself in Rong Yu's heart, and I also understand the importance of him in my heart. If I could choose, I would never want to in this life. I won't hurt him even a hair, but I really don't know much about the situation in Dongling, and I'm afraid that I might have inadvertently overlooked something and made him feel wronged. Xianyuan 11 said gently, Rong Yu is not as fragile as you think. Nan 11 said nothing. In the eyes of many people, Rong Yu is an invincible strong man, tough, cold, and ruthless, but emotionally he never feels safe, and there is paranoia hidden in his bones, which makes Nan 11 feel heartbroken. Only Nan 11 knew best that Rong Yu could endure any hardship, but he could not withstand even a little emotional harm. She was silent for a moment. Mom, after going to Dongling, can I be a queen who doesn't care about political affairs? Xianyuan 11 looked at her in surprise, and for a moment, a clear look appeared in his eyes. Do you want Rong Yu to be in power to give him a sufficient sense of security? Nan 11 nodded. 11 Rong Yu's sense of security is not obtained by relying on power. Xian Yuan 11 sighed, Mom has already said that he is not as fragile as you think. I can understand that you like him and feel sorry for him, but there is no need to treat him as a fragile child, and he may be self-defeating if he goes too far. Too much, not enough? Nan 11 closed her eyes and fell silent, her eyes falling on the lid of the teacup. She didn't know what she was thinking in her heart. Don't think too much. Dongling is not a den of dragons and tigers. It's not as scary as you think. Xian Yuan 11 smiled and patted the back of her hand. If there is any danger or uncertainty, I will not let you go back. Besides, with the support of the priest's hall, no one dares to embarrass you. Nan 11 raised her eyes and looked at her. After a moment, she nodded gently, thank you, mother. Rong Yu is here. Xian Yuan 11 looked at the man walking in the distance and stood up on her own initiative. I won't disturb you two young couples' affection. You can discuss with Rong Yu to see when it is more appropriate to set off. My suggestion is after Chongyang, in mid-September. Nan 11 said, mid-September. Xian Yuan 11 nodded, the climate in mid-September is cool and suitable for traveling. In September, your dangerous period will be over. Don't worry about causing too much discomfort. Don't be too anxious to travel. It's okay to arrive before the 12th lunar month. Mother-in-law is very thoughtful. Rong Yu came over and said in a gentle voice, let's decide it. Xian Yuan 11 smiled and turned to walk out of the pavilion. Rong Yu sat down next to Nan 11, Yunting and Yeching Cheng have already arrived in Shu. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 238. It took half a month to get from Dazhu to Shu. If you were traveling normally, it would take more than 20 days to arrive. However, it rained for a few days on the way and delayed the journey for 2 or 3 days. So when Yeching Cheng returned to the imperial capital of Shu, it was the double ninth festival. 3 days have passed. They rode lightly and simply along the way. Except for a few personal masters brought by Yunting and Yeching Cheng's own secret guards, there were no other servants accompanying them. Moreover, Yeching Cheng had been dressing up in men's clothing since leaving Dazhu, and the two of them rode horses. On the road, I had to do all my own food, clothing, housing, and transportation. The team was small and a little dressed up, so it hardly attracted any attention. When they were still 30 miles away from the prosperous capital of Shu, Yeching Cheng and Yunting abandoned their horses, switched to carriages, and arrived at the imperial city in the style of traveling merchants. The carriage stopped outside the solemn and majestic city gate. Yunting opened the curtain, and a layer of ice slowly covered the gentle face. The eyes looking in the direction of the city gate were particularly cold, revealing a bone-eroding look. Hate. Underneath the hatred, there is a deep and suppressed sadness and pain. After entering the imperial city, go to the princess's mansion first. Yeching Cheng said in a calm tone, don't show your face for the next 2 days. Revenge will come step by step. You have been waiting for 3 years. There is no rush for these 2 days. Yunting tightened his lips, closed his eyes, slowly lowered the car curtain, and leaned in the closed car in silence. The carriage drove slowly into the city. Although the customs of each country are slightly different, the scenery of the imperial capital is similar. The streets are bustling with traffic, and there are many shops on both sides, showing noisy and prosperity. Half an hour later, the carriage stopped outside the gate of the inner city. Yeching Cheng showed his token. After arousing a burst of disbelieving surprise from the imperial guards, he successfully entered the inner city and stopped outside the gate of Princess Qingqing's mansion. Come down. Both the housekeepers and the maids in my princess's mansion are all trustworthy. I moved out of the palace 2 years ago, and no one has successfully placed an informant into my princess's mansion. Yunting leaned against the carriage in silence, his eyebrows slightly gloomy, and it took him a while to come back to his senses. Don't all the princesses who have not left the palace live in the palace? It's inconvenient to live in the palace, Ye Cheng said calmly. With Ruier here, I have to find some way. Yunting was silent for a moment and nodded, thank you. Ye Cheng smiled nonchalantly, it seems that I am really unfamiliar. Yunting was startled, and a look of apology flashed across his face. It's not that I'm unfamiliar. He lowered his eyebrows and sighed, and took the initiative to reach out and hug her. I really thank you, Ching Cheng, thank you for protecting Ruier, thank you for never giving up on me in the past 3 years, and thank you for being willing to tolerate my cowardice. I am not omnipotent, Ye Ching said calmly. I try my best to do what I should do, but I am also a selfish person. There is no such thing as kindness without profit in return. As long as you understand my just think about it and know what to do next. Yunting hummed in a low voice, it's all up to you. Ye Ching said, get off the car. The two got off the carriage and walked into the princess's mansion. Although they entered the imperial city quietly without attracting anyone's attention, a token was required to enter the inner city. The moment the token was shown outside the inner city gate, the 9th princess returned to the imperial city. The news could no longer be concealed, and the 9th princess mansion was located in a prime location in the inner city where there were many mansions of powerful people. It was impossible for the carriage to arrive outside the gate of the princess mansion without any movement. Especially since Princess Jing Cheng is probably not in Dazhu right now. The gate of the princess's mansion is closed and guests have been refused for a long time. The sudden appearance of the carriage outside the princess's mansion will inevitably arouse others' suspicion. In this stage of increasingly fierce competition for the heir apparent, there were many eyes on the various forces in the imperial city. It was expected to notice the abnormality here, but Ye Ching did not care. It also takes some time for the informants to report to their respective masters, and they may not necessarily recognize Yunting at a glance. Even if they have doubts later, Ye Ching has a way to deal with it. The environment in the princess's mansion was quiet. The housekeeper came out with his maid to greet her. The palace guard closed the door after the princess entered the mansion. No need to salute, Ye Ching said in a calm tone, I want to take a shower and change clothes. I will go and prepare first. Later, I will clean up Linjian pavilion for the young master to live in. You don't know the young master I brought home today, and you don't know him. I don't know what his last name is, and where he comes from. I only know that his name is Master Ling Yan, and he is not allowed to reveal a word outside this mansion. The butler and maids all responded in unison, with respectful expressions on their faces, without even the slightest hint of curiosity. After bathing and changing clothes, I need to go to the palace first. Ye Ching turned to look at Yunting. The palace will soon know about my return. Instead of waiting for the emperor to send someone to summon me, I should take the initiative to see him. Yunting nodded silently. The two of them walked to Ye Qingcheng's Qingyun palace together, and Ye Ching said, I know you want to go into the palace with me now and cut that man into pieces, but from this moment on, the first thing you need to do is to endure. Yunting said, I know, you don't have to worry. Ye Ching hummed, reached out and pinched his face, stay here and read. There is a formation set up by me outside Qingyun Palace. No one can come in, and no one will disturb you. As soon as Yunting Fu entered the main courtyard, he saw the formation set up here. After all, Qi Men Dunjia is a very common and most commonly used skill in Juxiao Pavilion, but Ye Ching is proficient in Qi Men Dunjia, which he has known for a long time. Yes, it was just that we were both still young at that time and all the tragedies had not happened yet. He just found Kimen Dunjia novel and interesting. He liked watching Ye Ching demonstrate these seemingly profound and mysterious techniques, but he did not expect. After all, things have changed and people have changed. The carefree and joyful days of my youth can never come back again. Yunting stood in front of the window, his eyebrows tinged with confusion. After Ye Cheng took a bath, she put on a grand crimson brocade palace dress and took a carriage into the palace. When the carriage arrived outside the palace gate, she showed her token, which shocked the imperial guards guarding the palace gate. Ninth princess. He thought he was dazzled. The ninth princess was an illusion, and the token was also an illusion. Shouldn't the ninth princess be in Dazhu at this time? Why did you come back suddenly? I want to see my father, Ye Cheng said calmly. I have some clues about the disappearance of the prince and brother that I want to report to my father. Once they heard that the prince was missing, how could the Royal Forest Army dare to delay? He quickly reported it to the commander of the Royal Forest Army, who personally led the ninth princess to meet the saint. As for why the ninth princess suddenly returned from Dazhu and what happened there, we can figure it out later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 239. Qing Cheng is back. Emperor Chongming was startled, and suddenly sat up from the bed, frowning, with surprise on his haggard and old face. Where is she? Just returned to the princess's mansion, the palace servant reported. It is said that she brought back a man. Shouldn't she be in the Great Zhou? Why did she come back suddenly? I don't know. Emperor Chongming thought for a moment with a gloomy face, and said coldly, pass on my order, let her in immediately. Your Majesty. The eunuch hurried into the hall and reported respectfully, Her Highness the Ninth Princess requests an audience. Emperor Chongming was stunned. He had not yet completely recovered from the sudden news that Ye Cheng had suddenly returned to Shu. His thoughts were still a little confused. Hearing the eunuch's report, he only said in a deep voice, let her in. Yes. The eunuch went out to pass the message, and soon Ye Cheng walked in. Seeing sitting on the edge of the bed, the emperor said calmly, Your Majesty, I pay my respects to you, father. Emperor Chongming is over 60 years old and his energy is not as good as before. These days, he has become more and more haggard and pale due to illness. However, his eyes still fell on Ye Cheng's face like lightning, and he asked her like he was interrogating a prisoner, why did you suddenly come back from Dazhu? What happened to your brother's disappearance? Ye Cheng said, Your Majesty, I rushed back because I learned about the disappearance of the prince. Emperor Chongming's eyes were sharp. Did the royal family of Dazhu do it? It shouldn't be, Ye Cheng said calmly. After the news of the prince's disappearance spread to Dazhu, the regent of Dazhu sent people to investigate, but there is no definite news so far. Emperor Chongming said angrily, he disappeared in Dazhu, how could he have nothing to do with Dazhu? Ye Cheng said calmly, the clues point to Juxiao Pavilion. What? Emperor Chongming's face changed. What did you say? Your son said that the clues of the prince's disappearance point to Juxiao Pavilion, Ye Cheng said calmly, but there is no conclusive evidence at the moment. Emperor Chongming's face changed slightly, and his expression was a little gloomy. After a long while, he said coldly, you went to Dazhu for marriage, why would the regent of Dazhu let you come back? Your son is still free. What did you say? Emperor Chongming's face darkened. What do you mean? The power of the emperor of Dazhu has been hollowed out, and now the power of government and military power is all in the hands of the regent. Ye Cheng said calmly, this regent has a wife who loves him like a treasure. He has no plan to take other concubines, and does not allow the emperor to take concubines in the harem, so the marriage did not succeed. When Emperor Chongming heard this, a deep and unfathomable color appeared in his eyes. The regent controls the government. Yes. Emperor Chongming fell silent again, his eyebrows and eyes were gloomy, and it was impossible to tell what he was thinking. The palace was silent, the air seemed to be condensing, and the palace servants stood aside trembling, not daring to speak. It was not until the emperor got up from the bed that the personal eunuch immediately lowered his eyebrows and eyes and came forward to serve. "What do you think about the disappearance of the prince?" The emperor slowly stretched out his arms, and with the help of the eunuch, he put on a noble bright yellow dragon robe. The tone of the question was gloomy, and people could not detect the real emotion in it. Ye Cheng said, "I don't have any opinion." The emperor frowned and looked at her unhappily. "He is your brother. So you think I can save him?" Ye Cheng raised her eyes, with a strange luster in her eyes. "I am just a weak woman who can't even tie a chicken. Do you think I can be so powerful that I can find out the whereabouts of my brother immediately, or do you think I should be responsible for his disappearance?" You. Emperor Chongming was angry and was about to say that he was presumptuous, but a sharp pain came from his head, as if someone was constantly piercing his head with an awl, and the pain made his face pale suddenly, and his body shook involuntarily. "Come, someone." "Your Majesty." "What's wrong with you?" The personal steward hurriedly supported him and carefully helped him sit on the bed. "Your Majesty, shall I call the imperial physician?" Emperor Chongming closed his eyes and couldn't help holding his head with both hands. He was about to grit his teeth and ask someone to call the imperial physician, but the severe pain seemed like an illusion and suddenly disappeared without a trace. My mind was empty for a while, and then it suddenly stopped hurting, as if the severe pain just now did not exist at all. Emperor Chongming was stunned for a long time, and then slowly put down his hands. "I'm fine." But his voice was much more tired and sounded a little empty. "If the emperor is unwell, please ask the imperial physician to come and see him," Ye Cheng said in a light tone. "The health of the emperor is related to the country. Now the prince is missing and his life and death are unknown. If the emperor has any mishap, the country of Shu will soon fall into chaos." If this sentence came from someone else's mouth, oh no, no one in the court, including the prince, would have the courage to speak so bluntly in front of the king of a country, and even dare to say if the emperor has any mishap. But Ye Cheng not only dared to say it, but also did not worry about causing the emperor's anger. Because the emperor and the palace people have been used to hearing it. The ninth princess had been a bit of a loner since she was young. After the Yun family encountered trouble 3 years ago, she became even more cold and indifferent and difficult to get close to. Fortunately, the emperor was more tolerant of his daughter than his sons, probably because the ninth princess had lost her mother when she was young and the princess was not involved in the dispute over the throne. Although she had a bad temper, the emperor turned a blind eye and was unwilling to argue with her. From the time she entered the palace till now, she had not said a single word of genuine concern. She was not as concerned as other princes and princesses, and her attitude was particularly cold. The emperor did not seem angry. Apart from expressing some doubts about her marriage to the great Zhou and the disappearance of the prince, he did not show any other unhappy emotions. "I'm fine," the emperor said calmly. "Speaking of the throne, do you think I should abolish the throne and appoint another one? The prince was kidnapped and his life or death is unknown. What if? In my opinion, the country should be the most important thing," Ye Cheng said. "Unless the prince can come back safely, it is better for your father to make a decision early." The palace servant handed over the tea, and Emperor Chongming took it and sipped the tea slowly. "Did the regent of the Great Zhou send someone to escort you back?" "No," Ye Cheng said calmly. "The prince left a few people with me, and I just told the regent when I came back. Since they have no idea of marriage, they naturally don't mind letting me go back to Shu. Besides, the Great Zhou is now busy with the marriage with Dongling and has no time to pay attention to me." "What?" Emperor Kongming's face changed. "The Great Zhou is marrying Dongling." "Your Majesty heard it right," Ye Cheng said in a light tone. "The wife of the regent of the Great Zhou is Princess Dongling." Emperor Kongming's heart sank, and he couldn't say a word. Author's words. I heard that National Day is coming, and Mid-Autumn Festival is coming too. Are the babies going to have a holiday? Should I save some manuscripts and update them when the little cuties have a holiday? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 240. Emperor Kongming's eyebrows were gloomy, and there was a deep and unpredictable color in his eyes. After a long time, he said calmly, "I heard that you brought a man back from outside." Yeching Chen nodded casually, "I picked it up on the road." Picked up on the road. The emperor's face darkened. Pick up a man. I just picked up a man. Yeching Chen's tone was calm, and he didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it. I thought he was pretty good looking, so I picked him up and kept him by my side as a husband or something. Your Majesty, the princess is so ridiculous, the emperor said coldly. You are not young anymore. Since your marriage to Zhou dynasty failed, shouldn't you consider choosing a consort? Yeching Cheng said, there are so many outstanding young masters from aristocratic families in Shu, and I am afraid that I will be dazzled and not know which one I should choose. If my father is really serious, why not let me hold a husband selection banquet, just like the previous emperors? I think it's very interesting for my brother to choose his concubine. Nonsense, Emperor Chongming frowned and looked at her in disbelief. I have always known that you are a bit deviant, but I didn't expect that you are so shocking. You. Yeching Cheng raised his eyebrows. Father, do you think your son has no right to choose a husband? When Emperor Chongming was about to speak, Yeching Cheng already smiled lightly. The Queen Mother can keep a male favorite in the palace without caring about the royal family's face. What's wrong with a serious princess like your minister? You. My father is not in good health. It's better to think about the important things in the country these days. I don't need to worry about my father's marriage. She bowed gracefully and calmly. I plan to hold a husband selection banquet in a while. Choose a few beautiful ones to keep around you, and if necessary, you can even ask the Queen Mother for advice. Emperor Chongming was furious. You are so presumptuous. So presumptuous. Cough 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 cough. Your Majesty, the personal attendant was startled and hurriedly patted his chest, and ordered the palace attendants on the left and right to bring him a cup of tea. Your Majesty, please calm down. I will send someone to the imperial physician. Ninth Princess, please stop saying a few words. Well, the emperor is so angry. The palace attendant brought the teacup. When she passed by Yeching Cheng, she raised her hand to wipe the temperature of the teacup, and then flicked her finger. Bring it to father. Emperor Chongming drank the tea and breathed a sigh of relief, his face still looking a bit livid and gloomy. Father, please rest earlier. Take care of the dragon's body first. Yeching Cheng bowed. My son, please leave first. After that, he turned around and walked out of the emperor's palace. Emperor Chongming closed his eyes and sat on the edge of the bed tiredly. His attitude towards his daughter has always been a bit unpredictable. He is indifferent but does not dare to suppress it too much. Occasionally, he can't help but feel a little guilty when he thinks about her mother's family. But when he thinks about the blood flowing in her body, he can't help but feel sad. Being restrained will give rise to fear, so I always avoid it. Yeching Cheng is undoubtedly the most withdrawn but bold among all the princes and princesses. She has never been afraid of the emperor, nor is she respectful and flattering. Her eyes that seem to see through everything always frighten Emperor Chongming. He was furious at her disrespect but could do nothing about it, so he thought of sending her to Dezhou, out of sight. But he didn't expect that she would come back like a ghost. Emperor Chongming leaned against the bedside with a headache, and his chamberlain gently rubbed his temples. Would the emperor want to sleep for a while? Can I sleep? Emperor Chongming asked tiredly. You will send someone to check later and find out the identity of the person Qing Cheng brought back to the princess mansion. This slave obeys your orders. Yeching Cheng walked out of the emperor's palace and walked towards the palace gate alone, when a sudden shout came from his ears. Ninth Princess. Yeching Cheng stopped and turned to look at the person. Princess Ninth Zhangfu, who was wearing a blue uniform as a chamberlain, bowed and saluted. Although his tone was respectful, he said with a bit of arrogance, The Empress, please invite the princess to come over. Queen. Ye Qingchen was not surprised at all that the queen knew the news that she had entered the palace to meet the saint so quickly, but went to see her. Her face was pure and beautiful, her eyebrows were indifferent, she stared at him for a long time, and then she smiled faintly. I am really tired after a long journey back from the palace. I don't have time to see the queen today. If you have anything to do, we will talk about it another day. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left without even looking at him. No time? Zhangfu was so shocked that he didn't know how to react. It wasn't until Ye Qingchen really walked away that he turned his head in disbelief and looked at the figure walking towards the palace gate without looking back. Ninth Princess. Ye Qingchen's slender back looked lonely, and she ignored his shouts. Back at Ninth Princess Mansion, Yunting was practicing calligraphy. In the past 3 years, he has become accustomed to being quiet. When he has no tasks, he often stays alone, practicing calligraphy, playing chess alone, or just lying quietly with his eyes closed, calming down and reminding himself time and time again. Tolerate. The more you tolerate it, the more it becomes a habit. Ye Qingchen walked into King Yun Hall and saw him standing alone beside a long case with his hands on his hands. A wisp of deep breath diffused from the bronze furnace on the case. A piece of rice paper was laid flat on the case. On the paper, the word forbearance was freshly written in ink. The handwriting is calm and sharp, and there is no trace of the emotions in his master's heart from the words. After standing next to him and looking at him for a long time, Ye Qingchen's eyes turned slightly and fell on his gentle face. A soft look gradually appeared in his eyes. Have you had to bear it hard for these 3 years? Even though she knew it was nonsense, she still asked. How can it not be hard work? With a broken family and a blood feud, how could it not be hard work? It was hard work. Yunting put down his pen and looked up at the setting sun outside the window. Fortunately, it's all over. Is it all over? Can 3 years of forbearance be passed away with just a bland "it's all over"? Those lives that have passed away cannot be restored, and those who have left can never be seen again, so how can they pass? Ye Qingchen was silent for a moment. I came out of the emperor's palace just now and met Zhangfu beside the queen. Ye Yan is missing. The most anxious person must be the queen. She only has such a biological son. If something happens to Ye Yan, not only will he get the throne, otherwise, she, the queen, may not end up well. Yunting was silent. She didn't deserve a good death. Yunting. Ye Qingchen looked at his profile and suddenly chuckled. Are you interested in playing the role of male favorite for a few days? Yunting turned to look at her, his lips pursed slightly. I went to the palace today, and the news of my return must have spread throughout the harem and the palaces. Then there will be groups of people eager to come to me to inquire about the news. Ye Qingchen smiled lightly. Maybe I should let go use your hands and feet to play a wonderful game with them. As she said that, she reached out and lifted Yunting's chin. So, I will probably have to wrong you for a few days.